So you were talking about thought experiments for the self.
Okay, I know it's probably not a very interesting question to most atheists, and I tend to see most who just go with the line of this the self doesn't exist because we exist within a community and we take influences from all these kind of places. Um, you feel free?
Oh, great. Sorry, that's me trying to look at the screen. Sorry, I was.
That's no good.
I never feel free to. There you go. Typos live on air. Sorry, testing out the new technology. Apparently, I cannot handle listening to Dave having a mix, even though I'm not deep into the mix right now, and typing whilst looking at the screen all at the same time. But there we go. Sorry, carry
Nobody
on.
can ever handle listening to me.
So you were saying atheists tend to find that make statements like the self doesn't exist.
Yeah, and it's sort of a popular idea within theories of self that the self doesn't exist because we are built up of different influences from around us. Um, but there are also theories that, there is an individual there, but what makes up that individual? If you think about something like Descartes' cogito ergo sum
Yep.
argument, and he splits the human into physical and mental substances.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that you are the mental substance. So you could imagine your personality without a body, kind of thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose anyone who's ever had a dream or a daydream even can sort of imagine themselves as not necessarily being the body, can't they?
Yeah, exactly. But of course, I believe is something that arises from the physical.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really separate the two. But obviously Descartes did. But what makes the self? I mean, is it our physical bodies? Is it the personality? Is it a mixture of both? A popular thought experiment is this. It's Plutarch discussing the ship of Theseus. So the ship of Theseus was the ship that Theseus used to go and fight the Minotaur. And when it came back, it was apparently kept in the city. I can't remember the name of the city now. Athens, I think it was. Um, but they would replace wood as it rotted. And of course, during the journey, they would replace wood as it got damaged. So, if all these bits had been replaced, is it still the same ship as when it sailed off?
Right. Yeah, that's the whole axe one as well. That's quite a common one, isn't it? Like a much
Yeah,
simpler version of it. You have your, your handle and you have your head, and you might replace the head, and then you might replace the handle, and is it still the same axe? Yeah.
exactly. And there's one called the janitor's mop, which is very similar.
And also, to put it in human terms, they say every 7 years or so, pretty much every cell in your body is replaced. I don't know how 100% accurate that statement is. Again, that's one that I heard when I was younger, and I haven't actually verified as an adult. However, I know that there's a couple of people in the chat right now who definitely are more up on their science than I am. So if they would like to confirm or deny the 7 year myth for us right now, that'd be quite interesting. Thank you guys. But Dave, carry on. Is
Well,
it
we do
still
know
the
that,
same ship?
yeah, we do know that cells are replaced. But if we transfer that over to us, we're older now, we're taller, um, we're bigger, have more muscle mass, our faces have changed shape. We probably have very different beliefs to when we were 9, 15, 25. So, what makes us the same person as we were back then?
Well, pretty much just our mind and the fact that we still have those memories of those experiences. But obviously, if we go there, then we go, well, what about someone who's lost their memory? Are they a different self?
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons that questions of the self are sort of important. If we think of it in terms of justice, so if we prosecute, say, the Golden State Killer, here's a recent serial killer that was captured who was on the run. Um, if he had forgotten his crimes, should he still be punished for them?
See, that's a very, very difficult one. It depends on uh, his entire personality and all of that. Um, it's I find that one an incredibly difficult one to actually ask or answer, because I think it's situational. It depends on the context. If someone had the tune bump on their head and completely forgot who they were their entire life and everything like that, they are clearly not that same person, and they need to be brought up again from ground up. But if you go the whole someone got really drunk and blacked out and happened to do a violent act, then, well, it was their choice to take the alcohol. It was them originally. It was their um, responsibility, sort of thing. Um, Josh actually says parts of your body are just as old as you are. For example, you only get one brain. Brain cells don't regenerate as you age. Well, that's just explains why my brain is so dead these days. I haven't always been this way. I used to know stuff and be really quick.
I didn't.
Yeah, maybe that was just the Dunning Kruger on my part. I used to think I knew stuff and used to think I was really quick. And then I realized how dumb I really am.
Yeah, that's me. But yeah, I mean that it shows the difficulty of the nature of the idea of the self. Another Thomas Hobbes came up with a sort of expansion on the ship of Theseus thought
Mhm.
experiment. Imagine now that as this ship was being rebuilt, some kid went up and took each plank and then went back and rebuilt the ship of Theseus from the old planks. Which one is then the ship of Theseus?
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, it raises a point. Have you seen? Oh shit! Um, I've forgotten his name. Neo. What's his real name?
Keanu Reeves.
Keanu Reeves. So there's that movie where he clones his entire family, because they're trying to transfer consciousness, um, and he obviously his family have died. He's managed to save their consciousness, etc., and he has um, loaded all of all of that into them. And then he's also the whole reason he's doing this is he's trying to learn to put, for example, dead soldiers' minds back into the body of a cyborg sort of thing, so they continue the fight. And he ends up doing it with himself, and so there's then two versions of him, and they are both him at that point. But obviously, they from there on they've got very different experiences. But there is that almost singularity point where they are still the same because they have the exact same mind, until milliseconds after, like, oh god, I've got this different body and all that sort of thing. So again, what we've got there is the split of the mind being what makes a difference. So with something like a ship, it has no real form of consciousness. So how can we explain the self? It's really hard to differentiate the self from consciousness.
It is. The Keanu Reeves thing you're talking about there is more commonly known as the transporter problem.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because the transporter problem is the one where essentially, you in being dematerialized, you are completely destroyed. and then you are recreated somewhere else. Your consciousness is essentially loaded into that somewhere else. Um, and yeah, interesting
Yeah.
on that
So,
one.
like, there, during it happening, there's a transporter malfunction, and you're not actually broken down, but a copy of you is sent elsewhere, an exact copy. So, which one then is the real you?
Yeah. In fact, I think they even did that on one of the
Next
episodes of
gen.
Star Trek Next Gen with Riker, didn't they? And there was
Yeah, they
alternate
did.
Riker. Um, and obviously, in the initial point, both of you are the you. They also did that. What was that Paul Rudd one? Uh,
Yeah, that was recent too.
yeah, I can't remember its name, but that was also really good. It was a very different take on the transporter problem. Obviously, this was a cloning thing, so they brought you in, they revitalized you, made you feel good and young and everything again.
And then
Um,
killed you.
yeah, yeah, basically, but they didn't manage to kill him properly, so they still have the old version of him and the new version of him. In that instance, though, because they had improved the new version, you could quite easily say that they were two different selves. They had the same memories, but they were different. With the classic one, like Dave was saying, two exact copies, that is adds another dimension to it because you are exactly the same up until that point where you start experiencing different things. Because difficult.
Well, Josh says something interesting here, which is the oldest is you. And I can sort of agree with that. But if we think about something like the Thomas Hobbes thought experiment, so if we go with the self is a narrative of a history from a beginning point to the current point, and it's a history that is all linked. So if you look at it as an outside observer, you can see this history from beginning point to current point. So in the case of the transporter problem, the one beam down would have a brand new beginning and a brand new narrative. So the one that's didn't the one that's still on the ship is a continuation of the oldest narrative. So you could say the oldest one is you, and that is yourself. But think of it in terms of the Thomas Hobbes one, where the ship has been built from the old planks. So that is the oldest one. But it has a new creation point. It has a new narrative formed from the oldest parts.
Yeah.
It's still the oldest ship, but it's also a new ship. Just to add
Yeah,
a complication.
yeah, it is. And I find that one harder because it's lacking the consciousness. But if you say which one is the ship, um,
I mean, in some ways, it is the ship of Theseus because it's the original planks.
yeah,
It's the oldest planks, but it has a new origin.
yeah, it makes it a lot harder to actually answer that question.
It does. And I mean, you could even argue it's part of the continuing history of the original planks.
Yeah.
So it's actually the one that's replaced the old planks that has the new origin, but that's also a continuing part of the history.
Hmm. um,
Yeah. Yeah. See, Josh says new owner, creator.
okay.
And that's sort of what I'm getting at. It's a new origin story.
Yeah, it is a new beginning for the old parts. I suppose with the transporter problem, obviously when you're doing that, you're creating a new version, but the cells are created as old as they were in the first place. So technically, they're both equally old in at least how they might appear under a microscope, but some are newly created.
Yeah.
Um, so that's almost like completely. Ah, I don't know.
It's a complicated one, isn't it? It is, and it shows how difficult the idea of understanding what the self might be. Because if we want to go with the idea that it's just the personality and that is you, our personalities change. So you have to go with the continuing history. Um, but your personality is affected by your body.
Yeah.
So if you consider a disabled person
Hmm.
and they live in a society that does not cater for disabled people, so they have problems getting out and about, that affects how they see themselves, and that affects how the self is created.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you can't really separate the body from the self. And if you imagine a world class piano player
Hmm.
and they lose two fingers, that alters how they see themselves because they're no longer a world class piano player, but they are still the same person.
Yeah. I mean, it's just different aspects, isn't it? Um, I'm still, for me, a big part of it is definitely the consciousness, and as you say, the continuing history. As you say, with the piano, they've lost their fingers. They may no longer be the pianist anymore. They might be. They might still be just as good, and that would make them really world class. But chances are they wouldn't be. Um, but they're still who they are. They're still themselves. They're just a different path of themselves. Um, I find it harder with something like where we're basing it purely on something physical, like the ship, because there is no way of it to tell us if it still feels the same or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, um,
The
Josh,
idea of the ship of Theseus is mostly to get us thinking about what it means for something to be the same as it was before something changed.
Josh has a good question. Is it possible to not be yourself?
To an outside observer, yes.
Right. So,
Because the
for example,
outside observer would have this idea of who you are and what you behave like. And if you don't behave like that, then you are not yourself.
so could we say that's sort of like how I might have a work version of me? The way I might behave at work would probably, hopefully, be a little bit better how I behave, or at least more professional. A little bit more careful with my words and who I say what to. And so, if someone who saw me outside of work went, "Oh, he's not himself tonight," but actually, that's the self I am outside of work. So, do we have different cells, or are they just all parts of the same cell?
Well, that is one argument from psychology in that we have different versions of ourselves that we present to various different people in various different environments. And if you think about the amount of people you interact with, each of those will have a different idea about who you are based on the interactions that you have with them.
So, from that, we can say there are different versions of the same self, but it's a lot harder to say such a thing when there's a different physical version of you. I
Yeah.
don't know what's going on with this track. It's like got the world's longest quiet intro. I'm spinning it up, and there's like nothing on it. Uh, it's like it's stuck.
Oh, nightmare.
It's all right. Let's just get the next one on the go.
Corrupted MP3, maybe?
Maybe, or maybe I just played the wrong track. Um, I didn't load the next one in. That's what happened. I'm paying less attention to the music that's going on tonight because obviously I'm just playing some metal in the background rather than having a mix, and so I'm just sort of, oh yeah. But you know what? We're on their penultimate track, so after this I'm gonna have to play something else.
No,
But
I'll
on
just.
that front, I do want to say if anyone has any tracks or bands that they want to send us, that um, we're looking for to promote anyone who makes a decent tune of pretty much any genre. I'd rather it was electronic music so that I can have a mix, but I love my metal as well. In fact, I listen to pretty much anything most of the time. There's few genres I stay away from. But Dave would really appreciate it if you had some Gabba. I don't think anyone else would, but if you do, send it over.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, we're looking for some music. Obviously, there's the old copyright issues that you might have when you post your videos to places like YouTube. Um, so we don't want to get strikes against our name or anything like that and lose our channel. So we would prefer to play content that we've got permission to do so. Most of the stuff we played so far, we haven't had any strikes against us. They've just said that if you wanted to monetize this in the future, you wouldn't be allowed to because you're playing so and so's track. And that's fair enough. I mean, the main point for us is to entertain you. But it would be nice one day if we could actually do this more often, and to do that we will eventually need to monetize the videos or find some other way of generating income. But anyway, we were saying, Dave.
I can't remember what I was saying.
Good.
That was me thinking I was being interesting. You know. Um, yeah. So that's one way of thinking about the self. John Locke comes up with kind of an interesting idea in that we can split the human into two different things. We can look at the man. I know it's sort of sexist terminology, but we are talking about hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, generally when
Um,
I think someone says the man, I tend to think they mean the human anyway.
that's basically what he's referring to, the
It's
physical body.
Yeah, like mankind. I mean, I know it's gendered language, and in current today's climate, we should try and avoid it. But I think if we understand that these terms probably didn't have as much of a sexist intent as they would be taken if they were invented today, when we're talking about mankind or the man, generally it is a general term for humans.
Yeah, basically. That's roughly how he was putting it. Um, so we have the man, which is the actual physical body, and we have the person, which is the psychological aspect or the actual personality itself. And we can split them into two. So if you have, say, oh, who's
He
Phineas,
just said
what's his
cancel John Locke. Very relevant to current cancel
Yeah.
culture.
Hi. Um, have you ever heard of Phineas Gage? I
No.
think that's his name. He's a guy who got a pole through his frontal lobe. And according to legend, his entire personality changed. He became like a heavy drinker, started swearing a lot more, became more impulsive. So his personality changed. So he would be the same person, the same man, but a different person.
That's
Does that make
interesting.
sense?
Yeah.
And that's one way to look at the self. John Locke actually has a few good thought experiments in his essays on human understanding, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the first one is the prince and the cobbler. So a prince wakes up in the morning and he looks in the mirror, and what he sees isn't his usual handsome and well groomed self. What he sees is a, the face of somebody else, and it's like this hardworking cobbler. Um, the skin's been discolored and that kind of thing. Um, and when he goes to sleep, he still feels the prince because he still has the memories of all of the things he'd done before. Um, he still has his education, but he's a different body. And he would, if he went up to the castle again and said, "Wait a minute, no, I'm the prince. Let me in." They would look at him and go, "Well, no, you're not. You're just pretending to be."
Yep.
So would he still be the prince?
Well, to himself, he definitely is. And technically, I would personally say if his consciousness is that, then yes, he still is. It's just that no one would recognize him or believe him. They'll just see him as a madman who's come up going, "That's me. That's who I'm supposed to be. That's yeah. I'm definitely the prince. I just don't look like me. I can tell you everything about my family."
Yeah, but again, an imposter could do the same.
Yeah, yeah. There'll probably be a few family secrets that not many would know, but even then, especially in the electronic age, it's even harder to come along with that.
Exactly. So here we have the idea that the self is entirely mental, entirely psychological.
Yeah. Josh actually says in theism, so that's anyone that believes in at least one god, um, is the soul the true self or is it the consciousness? Um, I think that would depend on the theist you spoke to, personally.
I would too, because if we go to something like Hinduism with or Buddhism with reincarnation, it's the same soul put into different bodies
Yeah.
through the ages. Um, but if your soul has no memory of the previous life, it can't be the same self.
Oh, yeah. That's interesting, isn't it? Actually, because you sort of are, but you're not. But then when you die and you return to soul form, you remember all of your lives, don't you? Within it, and you've taken on that experience, and then you're reborn again, and then you've got no memory again. But when you're in that spirit form, I think that you technically have. It's been a long, long time since I've studied any Hinduism, if I'm honest. But I seem
Yeah.
to remember that was the case with it.
And so then the idea, like you're saying, is it the truth? Is the soul the true self? Well, no. In those instances, it would be the combination of many, many, many different selves.
Yeah, but could we refer to that maybe as the true self? It's all of yourselves. In the same way that if you have different experiences through your life, if you forget one but then you remember it later, you've then got loads of different experiences and then you're a more complete self. It's different aspects of the same self, except on a metaphysical level rather than just. Yeah.
An actual experiential level.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes it more complicated, doesn't it?
Yeah,
And
Josh, shut up.
so it kind of shows you the idea of how complicated the idea of the self is.
Mm-hmm.
And just to even start to think about it is formulating those beliefs and those ideas. Just where do you start?
I don't know.
Send me £19.99 a month and I'll tell you.
uh, uh,
Um, so John Locke also has another scenario that he
oh
puts
yeah.
forward. And this is Socrates and the mayor.
Mm-hmm.
A man called Socrates is not quite what he seems. He appears to be just one person, but in fact, within the body, there are two distinct people. By day, the day man goes about his business, thinks his thoughts, and so on. But by night, a completely distinct consciousness inhabits this body. The night man has a very different personality from the day man. The day man is a thoughtful philosopher. The night man hates philosophy. All he cares about is golf or darts or
Is
some
this
other
a bit of a
sport.
Jekyll and Hyde thing in a
Sort
way?
of.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of. Um, Neither knows of the other's existence and neither has access to the other's thoughts. And this isn't quite as far fetched as it sounds, of course, because there are genuine cases of multiple personality.
Yep.
Um, and on occasion, neurosurgeons sever the corpus callosum, the nerves that connect the two hemispheres of the
Mm.
brain. I think it's used in maybe epilepsy or something like that. Um, and this can create distinct and independent consciousnesses within the same skull. Um, so a person in that condition can select a dress from the wardrobe with one hand while the other hand tries to put it back, kind of thing. So if there's two distinct individuals in that body, according to the brain, Um, which one is the self?
Yes.
I mean, one could argue that they both are because they're both aspects of the same individual.
Hmm.
He had so he it isn't there isn't just one personality contained. There isn't just one person in the man. The man is a couple of people,
Yeah.
but part of the self is the man and not just the person.
Chris and I actually had a bit of a conversation about this when we were discussing Fight Club, and we were having a discussion about the personhood aspect within Fight Club, because Tyler isn't just like a whisper, it becomes its own personality to the narrator. You've got the two split personalities there, and therefore I feel because they both have control of the body, they both have the same rights and duties. Obviously, Tyler pretty much ignores his duties to and obligations to others, um, but they both have them there. But I would see them as two distinct selves. Though by the end of the movie, it sort of infers that they eventually mold back into one self anyway, or at least that's what I took from it. Once he'd shot himself, and Tyler was like, ugh, he then seemed really chilled out and a bit of a changed character as the narrator himself. He seemed a bit of an amalgamation of like the two parts of the character came back to one. Um, it's interesting. I'd say the original again is still the self, but what happens if the original gets so subdued that it's mainly this other personality that takes over? Are they? Uh, it's really complicated, Dave.
It is. It really is. And if you throw in something like this into the mix, imagine the nighttime version of this mayor commits a crime. The daytime version wouldn't know anything about it. So, does the daytime version deserve to be punished for what the nighttime version did?
um, no.
But they're both the same person or both
Yeah,
the same man.
it's not necessarily punishment. He needs help to try and sort out the issue. I'd say he needs psychological help, personally.
I would agree. But if it's an actual problem within the brain structure itself, what help can be given?
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Like I say, it makes it just complicates it that little bit more.
Can we get, yeah, I suppose it's someone that would need to be kept under medical lockdown, um, but in the day given more rights and freedoms than he would probably get at night, where he becomes this other person. um, but I don't think like necessarily Dayhim does deserve it because he's not in control. He's got no influence. The best, I mean, if he's not even aware in the first instance, then there's nothing he can do preventative. It's not like he can chain himself to the bed every night. If he could do that, then maybe.
Yep. Um,
Um, so I don't think he deserves punishment for that. But
yeah. So that's the thing. I think a big part of the self, even though it's influenced by our physical bodies, a big part of what we consider to be the self is our psychological element. It's our personality.
yeah,
Um, Hence why Josh said, "Is it possible to not be yourself?" Because you have a particular personality, um, and people see you a particular way. You have particular ideals, ideologies, thoughts, interests. And if you were to suddenly change overnight, you would be a different self, wouldn't you?
yeah, I'd see it as a different self. He's had a couple of questions in the chat. I didn't want to interrupt you earlier. He said, "Was it Plato who thought you didn't learn anything? You knew it in your form before you were born, and you just remember it."
Um, there's an argument in the Meno where Socrates talks about how all learning is just recall and it's stuff you remember from past lives and previous forms. But Rosalind Weiss argues that this isn't something that Socrates actually believed. It's just something that he would use in arguments in order to make a particular case. But it might be the case that Plato did actually believe it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we don't even know if Socrates, that is, even existed or was just a character of Plato's.
I think it's a bit of both because there is Socrates in other material as well.
Yeah, fair. The other one he said, when is a person not responsible for past actions? So that is an interesting one. I sort of mentioned what I thought on it a little bit earlier, in the sense that if you have a complete brain wipe, you're obviously not the same self. Whereas if it was, say, an alcohol blackout where it was your choice to do that, so you chose to have the alcohol, you chose to be irresponsible, you chose to drink so much that you didn't remember. And I'm not talking about someone force feeding you alcohol. I'm talking about you've decided to have a lot that night. Um, there's a big difference between the two. Yeah. So where's the line between those two? Obviously, if you've done something that has resulted in a blackout, that's your own fault. Mm,
Well, here's one way to look at it. Um, Imagine a guard commandant in World War II who was putting Jewish people to death.
hmm
Um, Now, at the end of the war, he's fled. Eventually, he's caught, but when caught, he has full degenerative brain problems and he can't remember anything. He can't even remember his own name. Should he be punished for the actions he made when he was younger? And I would argue no, because punishing him would just be a retributive act. It would be an act of vengeance and revenge.
does it serve any real utility?
Exactly.
Um, yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. I agree. It doesn't seem to.
Yeah. I mean, he's sort of still responsible because that physical body and that his degenerative condition is part of his history. Um, so he theoretically is still the same person that he was, but it actually serves no purpose to punish him beyond getting revenge.
Uh,
But if he can remember,
yeah, that's a big difference. A lot of it comes down to memory, doesn't it? And again, we've got that continuity thing, um, similar that when we were having our discussions on personhood and everything like that. There's when it comes to the self, a big part of it does seem to be the continuity.
exactly, and this is something I'll talk about when I talk about John Locke's theory of the self in a bit more detail. One of his arguments is that responsibility, because he discusses it in terms of religious beliefs. So imagine on the day of judgment, you get punished for for your actions.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about what God will punish you for. But of course, we're not theists, but it still has some philosophical utility to discuss the problems he brings up and the ideas that he brings up about who is worthy of punishment and why they're worthy of punishment.
Mm-hmm.
And one of that is to do with what you can remember. You will only be punished for what you remember, and you should only be punished for what you can remember doing. And
Yeah,
Thomas Reed has some good criticisms for this, which I'll also bring up.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say, like I said with the alcohol thing, you might not remember what you did, but you're still responsible because you chose to put yourself in that situation in your first place. It's a bit different from getting knocked out and suddenly not being you. But then, what happens if someone is in that situation where they genuinely don't remember, but actually they end up having a full memory reboot themselves, and all of a sudden they do remember everything? Where do we sit with that one?
Exactly. And imagine something like this. I can remember back to when I was a kid, and I can remember some things that I do. But there may be days where I don't remember that because nothing jogs my memory to recall that. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah,
There can be times when we remember something, and other times where we don't remember the same thing. We genuinely forget that same thing. So are we only liable for punishment on the days that we can remember it?
yeah, it's a bit different, isn't it? But if something can easily jog your memory to do it, it's a bit of a difference. That's something in the long-term memory that you have trouble accessing versus something that's no longer there at all.
Yeah. But there can be, I can go years without thinking about something, and then just suddenly something comes to my mind for no particular reason that you can put your finger on, but then you might forget it again for a couple of years.
Yeah, yeah, that's understandable as well.
So are you only liable for your actions on those few moments when you can remember it? I would argue no, because they're still part of your history. You might not have forgotten it, um, or you might have forgotten it, but you still did it as such. It was still part of your personality and your actions and your narrative of history.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, I'm with you there. That makes
Yeah,
sense to me.
I mean punishment. It seems like a harsh word because when you hear that word, you think of retribution and vengeance and revenge and that kind of thing. But really, I think of punishment in terms of admission of guilt, learning what you did, and making good on what you did. So if you smash a window, beating you isn't really punishment for what you did. Um, or it's not really just. That might be a better way of putting it. It's not really just to beat you because that still leaves the window smashed and leaves the other person having to repair the window. So a just punishment would be more like you having to replace the window and put it in and that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Having to pay for its gear and maybe something extra on top. Not only replacing the window, but you've also caused this person an inconvenience as well. So
Exactly.
perhaps something a little bit more. Yes, you have to replace the window. You have to pay for it all yourself. You can do it yourself if you can do it to a good degree, or you pay someone else to do it. That's fine. But you've also upset the person. You caused them a little bit of emotional trauma at the very least. So there probably should be something a little bit more than that. But again, it should be going to placate that person in some way rather than being thrown in jail or having to pay the government a fine. You haven't done anything to government in this instance, really. They might have had to have got involved, but in the person you upset is a human person who owned this thing that you've ruined. So that's where the money and everything like that should go, surely.
Exactly. And now imagine if you got away with it 10 years ago and you suddenly remember it happening and it suddenly found out that you did it. It's still just to make you have to atone for that.
Yeah,
Um, and even if you don't remember doing it and it turns out that you did do it and they can show that you did it, it should still be on you to atone for whatever you did. In the case of you like a degenerative brain disorder where you clearly do not remember anything and you clearly do not function, that's a different story.
yeah, I'll agree with that. Yeah,
So, yeah, but it that's something that John Locke talks about, and I'll talk about that in a future episode when I talk more specifically about theories of the self. Like I say, this was more about giving some ideas about how to think about it. how to
Hmm.
go about starting to think about it.
Yeah, makes sense.
And yeah, we've been on about an hour, and I think that's probably about enough. It's sort of giving people a rough idea.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that was our main focus with this sort of thing. We're not trying to completely blow everyone's minds with these short video episodes. I don't know if you've listened to our podcast, but the Fresh Air podcast is generally a lot more detailed than we go into on these streams. These are basically quick, snappy sort of videos that give a really rough overview of the subject, and we can maybe lead you on to things. We mentioned personhood, for example. We did, I think it was about a 2 hour podcast on personhood, and in that we only really covered a particular theory of personhood. So it's something we are going to be coming back to, either in season 3 or 4 of Fresh Air. We've got loads of topics that we want to discuss. These streams are a bit of fun, having a bit of music, a bit of conversation. It's fantastic that we can now get everybody all chatting and the messages are popping up and all that sort of thing. I think that thing sort of worked. I have noticed though that with the things down there, a couple of them aren't playing that should be. There's the one for the 12th of September that isn't coming up, so I have to look into why. We do have our rock paper scissors showing down there right now. I might take that one out for next time. That was just me messing around. Oh, there it is. History for Atheists, September the 12th, 8 p.m. GMT.
Nice one.
So it is there. Honestly, any feedback that you can have for these live streams, anything you want us to go into, do more, we're more than willing to go into. If you'd rather that we, instead of playing music, that we played games or something like that, we're happy to give that a go as well. I mean, I'm honestly up for trying pretty much anything. I find these sorts of things incredibly fun. At the end of the day, I just enjoy having these conversations about all of these different topics and things like that. And yeah,
I do. I love to talk philosophy. Funnily enough.
That's pretty good considering your degree.
Aye.
God, could you imagine if you actually hated philosophy? Is that evil, Dave?
Is that possible? Only
Could.
weirdos hate philosophy.
Maybe you're doing this degree to revolutionize contemporary philosophy, and you're actually just going to say, see, I've just proven it's all bunk by the time you've got your PhD.
No, you have to be somebody who doesn't know what fallibilism is to believe you can do that.
And that is a little treat that we will bring up in a future episode. We're not even going to announce what that one is, I don't think. Not just yet. Not just yet. Let's get it
No,
ready.
we've still got some stuff to get done first.
Yeah, that one's actually going to take a little bit of planning. So,
And they'll get to watch us watching some videos while we do it.
woohoo! It'll be like
So it
Mystery
won't
Science
just-
Theatre.
Yeah, it won't just be us that they have to listen to. There'll be someone else that they can listen to.
Yeah, and you might be incredibly annoyed with that. I don't know. But honestly, it's been fun doing tonight's stream, actually, because it's been a little bit different paced. I got to play my mate's band's music as well, which seemed to go down quite well. I will try and post links in all the chats and everything like that when we're fully done with it. And yeah, I mean, as always, we're up for the feedback. We're up to knowing, whatever you want, whatever you're interested in. It was nice to have a few people join us in the chat tonight.
It was. Thanks, Josh and Chris.
Yeah, we've had we often get like comments on the YouTube videos and things like that. Although it's usually on the quick fire round, which typically we got a dropout last stream, which is just
Yeah,
great.
it seems to have gone perfect tonight.
Yeah, well, I'm wired in through the power line. I don't get anywhere near the speeds on the power line as I do through the Wi-Fi, which is weird in itself. But there's a lot of stability issues that I seem to be getting with the Wi-Fi at the moment, which I can't fully explain, but it could be because I've just got so many wires and things in here now with like the triple monitors, webcam, and turntables. Maybe it's just causing enough interference that I'm going to have to stay wired in. It doesn't matter. I mean, the main thing is the upload, and the upload hasn't changed, and it's just made the connection more stable. Plus, we're now streaming to a service that then streams everything on for us, rather than it being just a singular service. So as long as their connection is stable, it doesn't really matter. Um, and thanks Chris and Josh for making comments in the chat. We actually had quite a few listeners pop up today, more than we've had on the live streams at a single time, so that's absolutely fantastic as well. We do get a lot of people viewing the videos afterwards, and that's when they ask questions on things like the quick fire round. And obviously the last quick fire round didn't get published, and I didn't actually prepare one for tonight because we were just doing a test stream, and to be honest, I thought it was all going to go wrong, and I was just going to have to apologize to everybody for how bad it was. But you know what? It's turned out that actually it was okay. It all seems to be working. So on that front, fantastic. As I said, let me know if you like the images popping down there. And the ability to join us in the chat and have all of your comments turning up down there. And any other comments as well. That'd be absolutely fantastic. Tomorrow we are on Cheshire's stream, so we're not doing our own live stream. We're on Cheshire's stream at 6:30 p.m. GMT, covering off the Aaron Rock. And then on Wednesday, back at 8 p.m. GMT, we have GMT, not N. We have Josh on the stream with us discussing his, philosophy for kids and his podcast, Little Philosophers. And then Thursday, we should have Martain with us. Depends on his work schedule, though it can be a bit iffy. He did want to discuss the Black Lives Matter, especially with everything that's going on. But we'll see what actually comes out on the day. And then that's it for this week. Next week we'll probably be back to our usual Tuesday, Thursday, maybe a Wednesday. But we've also got Saturday the 12th, so we'll see what's going on with that. Any topics or anything you want, please ask us. Please let us know, and we will be planning a couple of others, a couple of longer episodes as well. I know Dave's got one that he's brewing and he's trying to make it excellent.
Excellent.
Tonight's music through the live stream. Obviously, I had a bit of a drum and bass rinse out before we officially went live. But tonight's music has been both Tormenta and S4E, both a couple of people I knew. John Beard from the days of working in pubs, and he used to play music with my friend and come on when I was doing the radio show. He'd come on, we'd have jams and stuff like that. And S4E, he's a Finnish guy called Henry, and he used to post music on the same site that I did. And when I was doing the radio show, I'd play his tracks and mix his tracks in together and all that sort of thing. So I still had a bit of his catalogue. He's got a new album that's coming out soon that he's going to send over in the highest quality he can. So I'm looking forward to having a mix with that one. But if anyone else out there does actually have some music that they would like us to mix, whether any genre, we'll as long as it's decent, I'll play pretty much anything. I'm not tied into a genre. I prefer playing things like drum and bass and glitch hop because it's fun to mix, or a bit of breakbeat or anything like that. It's much more fun, but obviously I get that it's a bit more distracting than having something on. I can be more focused in the conversation when it's something a bit easier to mix, like trance or just playing metal tracks and pressing play when the next one ends. That's definitely easier. So anything you want, guys, let us know, and we'll try and make this show as good as we can for you as well as us. Dave, do you have anything you'd like to leave us with? Any thoughts of wisdom?
No, because I'm not wise.
See, that's how you can tell a true wise man.
Because he's not very bright.
He knows how much he doesn't know.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, then I guess we are at the end of tonight. You have been listening to the SciPhi broadcast by the folks at Fresh Air. answers-in-reason.com. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
Good night, all.
Good night, all. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, dude. That was really good.
It was.
Slowly fade out the music. Oh, yeah.